Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? You dialed set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Thank you, Jason, for engineering the broadcast. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, I have to be doing a little bit better than those in Victoria, Australia, because I received your email that the government is going door-to-door testing for the coronavirus. Is that really true?
Yeah. In Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Not in rural Victoria at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think they'd dare, actually. Because I think people, not talking about anyone in particular, but certain people might get a little bit upset at people going door to door in rural areas, and they might tell them to go away.
Now, I understand that this is being backed up by force. Is that really true?
It is. It's been on the press over here, on TV and radio reports, that they are sending the blue team and they are sending the military to back up this compulsory testing here in Victoria, and in Melbourne. And I would say that if the people of Melbourne are not prepared to stand up now and say no more, then it's really too late for them. You know? Because they're getting turned into a gigantic concentration camp. Our Premier is a madman. You know? He's lost. He's crazy. You know? Because there's so many things wrong with this. And let's just say one of these, they're called community outreach workers, and this is what they've got planned for everywhere, okay, is basically unemployed members of the public going door to door and knocking on people's door. He's hired 800 of them. Just Joe Blow down the road, Joe Sixpack and Jane Sixpack, probably more Jane Sixpacks than Joe Sixpack, knocking on people's doors, basically inquiring if they'd like to get tested for the coronavirus. And if they pass a positive test, which the tests aren't reliable anyway, okay, because they just detect if you had a coronavirus in the last 10 years, and I mean that's practically everybody, then you get quarantined for 2 weeks in a hotel, and then you get tested again, and if you test positive again, then they put you away for another 2 weeks. It's just insane. It's like, this is Adolf Hitler on steroids. This is what Adolf Hitler wishes that he was. And I just want to say to anyone in this, listening to this broadcast who lives in Melbourne, that if you put up with this, you've got rocks in your head. You need to do one of two things. You need to decide that you've had enough, or you need to leave Melbourne, okay? I can't tell anybody what to do, okay? And I mean, you have to decide on your own course of action if you leave there, but you do need to wake up, because this is like I said, this is what Adolf Hitler wishes that he was. This is the next step in this playbook is them dragging people out of their houses. by force of arms and forcibly putting them into a vehicle and taking them somewhere. You know, that's what the soldiers are for. That's what the police is for. I haven't heard about that on the press, but I know how this cookie crumbles because I've studied history. And, you know, it's, oh my gosh, I almost don't even know what to say. And it's just that they're acting like it's all totally normal. It's the worst thing. This is something that really, the only way that this makes sense to me is that I've studied what communists believe, and I've studied about the Hegelian dialectic, which is problem, reaction, solution, and I've studied history. I've studied the history of places like communist Russia, and I've studied the history of places like, Nazi Germany. This is Nazi-level Bravo Sierra that's going on. And people need to wake up and stop putting up with it. I don't know what else to say, Vincent. Would you like to comment on this?
Sure. Here in the United States, we've done some testing with something not quite like this, but, to prepare for this. And that would be called the Census Invasion Force. And those are people who are unemployed, who are paid, let's say, $10 an hour to hop in their own vehicles and then go find the people on the printout, the computer printout. That, maybe they just haven't responded the way the government wants them to respond on the census form. Meaning maybe they only did what was required by the law, which is enumeration. How many people lived in this particular property on this particular day, period. But some people get, an enhanced version of that, which might be 16 pages long, asking all kinds of personal questions it's none of the government's business. So they hire these people who don't have jobs, might not be able to get a job, and they pay them to go ride around and harass people. So we've had, the beginnings of what you're talking about, but not at the muzzle of the gun. But what happens here, if they don't like your response, or if the census invasion personnel lie on as to the results of what they found and report back to headquarters that, it didn't go so well, then they'll send the next level of invasion force. And if that doesn't work, they'll send the next level. And of course, there's plenty of threats that come in the U.S. mail as well from these census invasion people. So we don't have exactly what you are talking about, but I can tell you for decades, we've had the census invasion force across the United States in every county. And what they do is they don't send your unemployed neighbor. They send an unemployed person from another county. So you don't recognize them. So you can't say, wait a minute, why are you giving me such a hard time? You're my neighbor. They send someone who you would not recognize. That's what they do. So I can see more of this coming. I can see more of the lockdowns. And people are panicking. And I think that's what we coined the term in the very beginning of this corona experience as the corona panic. And that's what people are doing. They are panicking. By the way, class, just for my own amusement, I went on the internet yesterday and I went to samsclub.com and I searched for toilet paper. And I wanted to see if you could buy toilet paper, single ply, the 1,000-sheet single ply stuff, the best value stuff. And the answer is you can buy toilet paper. You can buy the puffy stuff, but you cannot buy the single ply 1,000-sheet best value toilet paper. It's out of stock. Still out of stock. So I just want to let you know, I don't see everything getting better. Some things are getting better. Restaurants are opening up, and then they're closing. And the restaurants, are dealing with people who I wouldn't put up with. Frankly, the restaurants are told by the government, you have to have social distancing and you have to have people wearing masks. Okay. So people show up at the stores or the restaurants and they refuse to wear the masks. And then when other people say, hey, I'm talking about other customers, hey, you're supposed to be wearing a mask. Then some of these millennial types just go ballistic. They lose control. They start throwing and damaging property, and they have their tantrums. And so there's a whole restaurant chain in the United States, a small one, very small one. They've decided, to heck with it. We're not going to put up with this. We're not going to put our people in harm's way because the generally dumb public can't handle following rules and regulations and requests. So this is happening all over the country. And I read a statistic. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the number is this, that, well, I'll wait and I'll give you that statistic. I'll find it exactly, and then I'll report that statistic. But it's about people who are willing to cooperate and people who are not willing to cooperate. Guineith, so how do you think this is going to play out? Do you think that that people are going to start squeezing the trigger?
I can't see them going and visiting Mick Gatto's house at any time. For people who don't know, Mick Gatto is a notorious Melbourne gangster. Okay, he actually tried to assassinate my husband Archie at one time, and there's a lot of gangsters living in Melbourne. There's a saying in Australia that when people from Sydney need to get a job done, they go and get someone from Melbourne to do it. That's how many gangsters live in Melbourne. I think that the gangland houses are going to get big red crosses on them. Okay, the known gang associate houses are going to get big red crosses on them and are not going to be visited. Because, like I say, I can't see them ever visiting the house of the descendants of Ned Kelly. I can't see them visiting Mick Gatto's house. I can't see them visiting Roberta Williams' apartment. That was the wife of Carl Williams, another notorious Melbourne gangster, and she has become something of an underworld queen herself. So, but most of the rest of the population of Melbourne who are not gangsters are not armed, and I think that some of them will tell them. There's a saying we have here in Australia, which is get stuffed, which I think I wrote the translation of get stuffed to you, and it means something like, I don't like you, you're annoying me, and I'm fed up with you, and if you don't leave right now, there's going to be physical consequences. That's something of the translation of get stuffed. So when somebody tells you to get stuffed, you find somewhere else to be. I think that the wise thing for people to do would be to tell these people when they show up at their door to either not answer the door or to tell them to get stuffed.
I like the not answering. I like not answering the door. We'll be right back. Guineith is with us live in Australia. David is joining us. Welcome, David, in Illinois.
Hey. Yeah, how you doing?
How you doing?
Yeah. We finally stopped raining.
It's raining?
Storms on us. It's been raining all night. We've been getting rain since like Monday, and they were bad storms yesterday, real bad all day.
Before you continue, Dave, well, it's dry as can be here. It's like dusty. Class, before we continue, I'd just like to give you some advice about these storms. So here's what we do. We have power switches on all of our electronic equipment. So in the studio, for example, I have a separate switch or a power control box, and they used to make these back in the 90s. And this particular one has 6 switches, a master switch. Can you use that word anymore? A master switch. And and then 6 slave switches. And that was the term that was used, so I'm not being racist. So what would happen is the master switch would turn on electricity to all the other switches. And the slave switches would be, like for the computer, the monitor, the printer, auxiliary 1, auxiliary 2. That's what mine say. And you can buy these on eBay. They're about $30. So when a storm comes, I turn off the electricity to the monitors by just throwing the master switch. And then I shut down all the computers and then disconnect electricity. And the reason is because if you have a regular computer switch, these soft switches, your computer is always plugged in. But if you have one of these computer control switch boxes, you can literally shut off the electricity to the devices because these major storms can blow the computers. So we have them on our television monitors. So we watch DVDs and so forth. We have them on the DVD players. We have them on the stereo equipment. We have it on all the electronic equipment, literally, including the router. So I suggest you consider. And if you don't have one, that's okay. Just unplug the equipment. Unplug the monitor. Unplug the router. Unplug the computers. Okay? Unplug your microwave oven. Now, all those devices do have what's called metal oxide varistors, MOVs, metal oxide varistors, which attenuate the surges. But every time they attenuate a surge, they become weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually they just can't do it anymore. So they wear out. So the easiest thing to do to prevent your equipment from being destroyed is to unplug it, especially during lightning storms. And that's what we do. Okay, so David, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. We've been having so many protests. Between the protests and the storms, you can hear from Ferguson and St. Louis, you can hear the explosions going on. So Dio asked me, what's going on? I was like, you could choose. You can either say it's fireworks or the storms, or you can say it's artillery and explosions. It depends on how you want to feel. Just don't worry about it. It's not here.
Are you serious that there are explosions? Do you think it's fireworks? Do you think it's gunfire?
No,
what do you think
they're not fireworks. They're not fireworks. It's the same thing that happened last time in Ferguson. I'm surprised at how far it is away, and we can hear that. I mean, especially at night, it's real. You could hear it. It's real bad.
So what are these sounds? What would you? You could just hear. Are they?
Sorry.
Pistol cartridges? Are they shotgun rounds? Are they high-powered rifles? What do you think they are?
No, we've been hearing. We're like on the edge of the city where we live. We're on the edge of the town. We're like out in the country-ish, and we've been hearing a lot of fire, bullets going off late at night in the woods. You're not hunting out in the woods late at night. So that happens. But then the big stuff from those cities, those are the explosions. You can hear them. Them are bangs going off, and I don't know, what exactly they're shooting off over there or using. I'm not surprised they're using fireworks. It's something that my dad said they were always worried about in the past, because they're right there. Basically, you got explosives right there on the side of the road, when you go to some place. So, I'm not surprised.
I've seen videos, and I'm sure many of our class have, in some of the larger cities, especially on the East Coast. Some of these, we'll call them gangs, gang wars. These guys are taking rocket launchers and launchers for fireworks, the kind that go up in the air and at a predetermined altitude they explode into sparkling red and green and blue and yellow and white. They're launching those things at each other. They're using them as handheld rocket launchers, and they're aiming them at other people in the cities. And let's talk about that when we come back, and what's the relationship to that and the police. So David was mentioning some explosions going off, and I want to tell a class that, they make silencers. And I'm not advocating making a silencer, but I'm going to tell you how they work, what they do. So a silencer for let's say a pistol or a rifle has to deal with three sounds. One sound is made when the action moves. So let's say you have a handgun. Now let's say it's a revolver even, and it's unloaded. There's no rounds in the chamber. and you point it in safe direction, and you squeeze the trigger, and the hammer goes back, and it makes this clicking sound. That's the mechanical sound of the rifle, pistol, shotgun, revolver. Okay. Then, if you had a round in the chamber, the percussion cap would be hit, and there'd be a small explosion, a spark, if you will. It ignites the powder, and then there's a boom, the explosion of the explosive powder in the cartridge shell, or shotgun shell. That's rifle, pistol, shotgun, revolver. And then, if it's a fast-moving bullet, the projectile is a bullet, the sound that that bullet makes when it exceeds the speed of sound is a crack. So there's the sound of the action, there's the sound of the explosion, and there's the sound of the breaking the sound barrier of the projectile. So the sound barrier is about 1,100 feet per second, roughly speaking, depending on altitude and humidity. So a rifle will make the boom and the crack. And you're not going to, if it's far away, you're not going to hear the action. Okay, you hardly hear the action anyway, but those are the three sounds that it makes. So a slow-moving projectile, let's say a shotgun shell, makes a boom. A standard velocity 22 makes a boom. A high velocity 22 makes a boom and a crack. So we hear these kinds of sounds all around here in Missouri. As a matter of fact, last night there were some coyotes who were interested in having a meal with some of our cows, little calves. And they got a chance to hear the sound of the boom and the crack. So that's what happens around farms. But what you're talking about is not around farms, right, David?
No. Can I clarify? I could tell you something about suppressors.
Sure.
Now, they're supposed to be suppressors, not silencers. You can. Now, they're supposed to start making them. Now, I have here a 22 Magnum with a large capacity and threaded barrel because I want that quietness if I need to at that correct time. But if you don't want to pay for the stamp, I'm going to put a disclaimer out ahead of time. You have to have intentions on doing this. So you can get an adapter to put on the edge of your barrel, and people are arguing that they're using it to use a spray to clean out your barrels, because without doing that, then it's illegal. Because then you can take simple oil filters from cars and screw it on the end of that barrel. If you need to, say if anarchy broke out and you had no choice and you don't want to be known where you are, those filters work better than suppressors.
So I know just a little bit about this, and the reason I know about this is I used to go to gun shows, and I saw these devices. And there were guys that had tables, and they had this thread-on adapter. And literally it's what David said. It's like, it's a small device. Oh, if you were to put your thumb and your forefinger together, that little circle that it would make is about the diameter of this thing. And it might be, let's say, an inch long. And a person would screw that onto the barrel, and then they'd find an oil filter, just a plain old oil filter that was a canister type oil filter, the kind that you'd spin on, like a Fram type that, those orange ones that you see at the store. You'd screw that on there, and then theoretically what a person would do is use that to trap the oil that would come out from cleaning that particular barrel. So, you spray the oil in there, and then, just to make sure that oil didn't go spraying out into the environment, you'd screw an oil filter on there, and then you'd shoot the first round through the oil filter. And it would make the hole in the right spot. Well, I gotta tell you what I saw. I saw the police come to to those gun shows, and those guys were asked to come with them.
Oh yeah,
and they cleaned out their inventory. Some police believe that's illegal. To me, it's a stretch. It really is a stretch to say screw an oil filter onto a barrel. By the way, most oil filters are so large you can't see where you're going anyway, because, you use the iron sights and you can't see through the oil filter because the oil filter's too big and it blocks your vision. But, I don't have one, Glass. I do not. And I'm not saying don't get one. I'm not saying do get one. I'm saying I just don't have one. And I'm not going to get one.
Yeah, I was just saying that if you do go and somebody cons you into buying one at a gun show, I would not purchase one, or at least not if they say, hey, you could screw a filter on this and nobody could hear it. That's when you need to walk away. They just entrapped you. Let it be. Leave.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good point. So do you think from your perspective, and I'd like to ask Gwyneth what she thinks is going to spread, do you think from your perspective it's going to radiate out from the cities? And I guess you're talking about St. Louis. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. St. Louis is kind of not too far, about 15-minute drive from me. I'm on the other side of the river, so I can see the arch. I personally, these cops have been so headstrong and the thing is, here's the other thing. They're assuming they're protecting the elite, but what the guys and the lower officers don't realize is they'll throw them under the bus in a heartbeat. Look what they're doing now. And those guys are still saying, and I feel bad for them in a way because they think they're still part of the group. Oh, if I keep protecting them, they're going to protect me. I guess we'll have to wait and see when the courts actually come down with the convictions of whether or not they're convicted, which I'll be surprised if they have anything major on majority of them. But the other thing I was going to say is, have you seen the news articles with everybody showing all these photographs that the cops are showing up? I've said this before. These guys, if you can access their cell phones, and they carry more than one cell phone for several reasons, I'm telling you, there's videos, there's pictures, they would send them to me all the time, and this stuff would be so disturbing, you gotta shut yourself up. But you're like, wait a minute, they got the videos, there's people standing there, but they're all badges, and they're all just looking like, wow, cool, attitudes and all this stuff. And
what are you saying? Are you saying that the police are thinking this is fish in a barrel? What are you saying, David?
Yeah, I don't think, for most of them, I don't think they realize that this is a particularly, I personally think that it's been their attitude for years. As long as you back and do what your superiors tell you to do, they're going to back you 100%. And we've gotten to this point now where they're attacking most average American citizens, and we are the target. It used to be not that way, and it's that way now.
Are you saying that the police are attacking us?
Oh yeah. We would sit there and drive around, even when he got older in the federal government. They just drive around looking and searching, and they got the equipment in the cars. They can see who they're dealing with. They can see what kind of money they have access to, what kind of resources they have, and those are the targets.
Okay, I was at the dinner table last night, talking with the family, Mrs. Finelli and the boys, and I was hearing stories that I never heard before. One of our boys was going to the university on a regular basis, and he got pulled over in Niangua, Missouri, which is a part-time cop, part-time police car, part-time radar gun. Just one cop. Well, I should. If I had a website, I do have a website, but it's shut down because of the harassment that we've got. But if they stopped harassing me, I could show you some of these things, and you could look for yourself. But Niangua town hall or city hall is dilapidated and falling down. I mean, you can't imagine a more ramshackle public building than the Niangua town hall. And so they have this one rent-a-cop. And my son was telling me that she used to pull him over because she wanted proof that was his car. Now, when have you ever heard a police person in uniform with a gun pulling over a young person in his 20s, demanding license and registration and proof that this antique car was his?
I've had those occasions before.
The police have done that to me, Vincent. With my farm ute. I was just out and about. Actually, I was helping out a local old lady with some mulch for her garden because I was at her place and she said that her trees needed mulching. And I said, I've got some mulch at my place, so I'll just go and I'll be about half an hour. I'll be back. I'll put a couple of bales of mulch in the back of my vehicle and I'll be back in half an hour. The cops pulled me over, the local cops pulled me over and demanded evidence that I owned that vehicle, that farm truck. Mm-hmm. They've done it to me.
Well, when this happened to our son,
oh my God.
When this happened to our son, he said she wanted to look in the car, license and registration, and look in the car. He said, "Why did you stop me?" And she said, "I want to see if this is your car." And he said, "That's not probable cause." And he said, "Am I under arrest?" And she said, "No." He said, "Well, I'm leaving." And he's done that many times, when he gets stopped. He asks if he's under arrest. They stop our boys for all kinds of strange things. And it's not like they're racing around and peeling out and burning rubber and loud exhaust. They're just driving.
Yeah, they do that to people they don't like. And I guess that includes your son. That probably includes you.
Used to. Well, so then he told me about the state police. And he said he was driving, I think to Lebanon, Missouri, lights, sirens, state police guy pulled him over and said, "I got you." And my son looked out the window and said, "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything wrong." And the state cop said, "Oh, wrong guy." So, I mean, it's annoying. He thought he had the guy, but it was the wrong guy. And so the state cop just kind of was annoyed that, he wasted all this effort pulling this guy over who was our son. And then when he looked in the window and our son looked out the window and like, what's this all? I haven't done anything. And, he decided that, he did have the wrong guy. So I'm hearing stories about this, about all kinds of, exciting, where can you have this much fun for free? The only problem is they have guns. Okay. And it's annoying. And this kind of nonsense gets us, that's why there's protests and riots. It's not black and white. It's about the oppression. At least I believe that. We'll be right back. So, class, we've been calling this right here at USA Prepares well in advance of pretty much everything that's been happening. I'll call it the Corona panic. And the violence and the looting and the burning and all those things that are happening. We've told you that it was going to happen. We didn't write the book on how to do it. It's obvious. It's as obvious as the noses on our face, or the noses on our faces. There are, in 3 days, it will be July 4th, 2020. Most people call it the 4th of July. What are you going to do for the 4th of July? What they really mean is, how are you going to celebrate Independence Day? Well, here in Missouri, fireworks are absolutely positively legal. And that's one thing that I don't think really should be legal. I think fireworks are dangerous. I think they're idiotic. I think they're not necessary. I think they damage people, places, and things. They set fires. They injure children. And adults think that children just love this, and they have to go see fireworks, and they have to participate, and they have to buy fireworks. Well, in parking lots all over in Missouri, there are, and even farms on busy roads, they set up these tents, and people who are part of the government have these little businesses, and they sell fireworks. They import them from China, and they sell them. And they have chemicals in them, and they come from China, okay? Strontium, that produces the red, barium produces the green, copper produces blue, and sodium produces yellow. There are at least 19 kinds of fireworks. There are firecrackers, smoke bombs, fountains, sparklers, poppers, Roman candles, missiles, rockets, aerial repeaters, flying fish, comets, skyrockets. I can just see in my mind's eye what's going to happen on and after July 4th. Not in celebration, but just using these things that should absolutely, positively not be sold, fireworks, explosives, by people who want to cause problems. And I can just, a bottle rocket. A bottle rocket is it's like a firecracker on a stick, a small, thin stick, kind of like a toothpick kind of size, except maybe a foot long, a toothpick in diameter, let's say. And it's a lightweight piece of wood strapped to a firecracker type device that when you light the fuse, flames come out, the end pointing to the ground. It just takes off. Off it goes. Well, they make bigger ones than that. They have these little rockets that you light, and they go a predetermined distance based on time of flight, and then they explode. And I can just see crazy people launching these at other people. And I can see the next thing that happens is tear gas, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets, and real bullets. I can see that happening. Guineith, do you see that as well?
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not in favour of banning fireworks, partly because I think that if people deserve Darwin Awards, then Darwin Awards ought to be distributed to them, and partly because the other team has so much more powerful armament than what we do, that if people can get access to anything to defend themselves, then they should probably do so just for their own self-defense at this time. Not to be offensive, not to go out finding people to hurt, but just because
I agree.
We are
I agree with you.
a war for them.
I agree with you.
And
the
so
only problem is, as a farmer, I agree with you, but as a farmer, I see what happens when these animals hear. I'm talking about dogs, cats, cattle.
It's horrible for the animals.
They don't know
really
what to do. It can cause a stampede. It can cause cattle to race away right through a barbed wire fence and slice them up, and they can die as a result of some moron having fun with fireworks. And then the other thing is when these rockets come down, they land on farms, and the cattle think they're candy or a treat. They don't know what they are, and they eat them and die.
Yep.
Then you have to
that's why.
I can see the point there.
Yeah, and that's why I'm against them.
Here in Australia, we don't have the 4th of July, but we used to have something called Guy Fawkes Night, which was celebrating a particular guy who didn't like the government very much called Guy Fawkes, and it was celebrating the day of his execution. And it was supposed to be, yay, we've got rid of this horrible government guy, but here in Australia, you had a lot of Irish convicts came over, in the early days, and they thought that Guy Fawkes was a hero. And so the British mandated that they celebrate Guy Fawkes, and they certainly did so, but they were celebrating him as the death of a martyr rather than, yay, we got rid of this really bad guy, which was the government's view. But they had Guy Fawkes when I was growing up in New Zealand as well. But here in Australia, part of Guy Fawkes celebration is you build a bonfire. And they used to have bonfires on the 5th of November, which is well into the fire season all across Australia. And some of them went out of control, but surprisingly few of them, actually.
Hold that thought. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Guineith is with us live in Australia. David is called in from Illinois. And I just want to mention we are now having horrific lightning storms. It's pouring after weeks and weeks of no rain. The rain is welcome, but I may get knocked off the air. So if I do, Guineith and David, can you just carry on until I can phone in? Just so if you don't hear me, just
yep.
So I had a question for David and you, Guineith. Why don't we start with Guineith? Guineith, fireworks are being sold all over all over the country. In some states it's legal, some states, only the government can have them. Now, I can imagine that people are going to say, I wonder what's in these things. They've got a fuse, they've got some powder, and they've got a canister. And what do you think do you think people are going to start taking these apart and making bigger and bigger devices with the contents of them? Putting them in plastic tubes? Mm-hmm.
Probably.
And we're talking about improvised explosive devices. Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably that's going to happen, actually. Yeah, I think that it is.
And that's what it's already happened in the United States. What people have done is they've taken liquids that are flammable, poured them into bottles, stuffed a rag in the end, lit the rag, and then thrown the bottle. And then what happens is when the bottle breaks, that liquid comes rushing out, and there's a big fireball. And those are called Molotov cocktails. They've been around for a long time. And it's an improvised, weapon. Now, of course, I'm not recommending it, and I'm not going to tell you how to do it. But everybody knows what I just said, so I'm not revealing any secrets. But that's already happened in the United States. It's happening, not quite on a daily basis, but it's happening in cities, and that's how these fires are starting. And some stupid people are doing like the dumbest. They're stuffing rags in gas tanks. And it's like beyond stupid. Beyond stupid. But that's what's happening. And do you see more of those kinds of things spreading throughout the world, Guineith and then David?
I think that it's only going to get worse and worse. I was watching a movie that was put out a number of years ago. It was called Left Behind, and it had a sequel, Left Behind 2, and it starred Kirk Cameron. And I was thinking to myself as I was watching this, actually, this was like the rapture happened, and, the world had to deal with it, basically. That was the plot of the movie. And I was thinking to myself, actually, what I'm seeing on the news and what I'm seeing as I, go into town and all the rest of it, which I do every couple of weeks, is this movie Left Behind isn't actually so bad. I go on the internet and I see what's happening in other parts of the world, and actually the movie where the rapture happens and all the good people, all the believers in Jesus Christ go away overnight, then the world has to deal with the chaos and the rise of the Antichrist and all the rest of it. It wasn't as bad as what I was seeing, when I was going on YouTube and just typing in Chaz into the YouTube search engine and hitting the search, little magnifying glass thing. So it's sort of like people have to, they have to have their head on a swivel. I know that we said that when this whole thing started. You'd better have your head on a massive swivel. If you live in any sort of urban or suburban area, the best thing for you to do is get out now, because there's really going to be no stopping this. And like I say, I've got some home decorating tips, okay? These cops and these military will not be so inclined to go and visit people's houses where there's a 6-foot-tall fence around the whole property and there's a big pet wandering around inside, like a big pet Alsatian, a big pet Rottweiler or Doberman, or even just a really big pet Saint Bernard or something, just any big dog. I'll bet that they will not be willing to go inside when they got a 6-foot-high fence around the property and a big dog in there and really tall gates. I bet that all the protesters and all the government officials and the military and all that will just pass them by. And the other people that they will pass by, I can almost guarantee it, is we've got a car brand here in Australia called Holden, okay? And it's a General Motors brand, So, and they make a car called the Holden Commodore, which in Australia is really, really associated with rednecks. And I'll bet that these guys will not go to properties that are decorated with 4 or 5 Holden Commodores sitting in the front yard. I'll really bet that they will not do that. You know, and maybe not even working, probably not even working Holden Commodores. If there's 4 or 5 non-working Holden Commodores parked in the front yard, or Ford Falcons, let's be fair, because we have the Ford and General Motors dichotomy here in Australia too. So if you'd rather go with Ford, then go with your Ford Falcon, okay? And I'll bet that if those sorts of properties get left alone as well, especially if there's a fence around them and if there's a couple of staffies, which is what we call Staffordshire Terriers, in the yard. I'll bet that they get left alone as well. But I can see that the people who are not going to get left alone are the ordinary, old-fashioned Melbourne suburbanites. And I noticed something, okay, because I used to live in Brunswick. I noticed something about the postcodes that were, because you see they're doing it by postcode. So one side of the street gets the government lockdown, tyranny, oppression, and the other side of the street doesn't because it's in the next door postcode. That's how it goes in Melbourne. And I noticed that 3056 was getting really seriously harassed, which is where the white middle-class Aussies live, okay? And 3058, which is literally next door, because I used to live in 3058, is not getting locked down. And 3058 is inhabited by the likes of Mick Gatto. I'm pretty sure I've seen him around. I'm pretty sure he actually has a house there somewhere, because I used to be a charity door knocker. And I'm pretty sure I knocked on Mick Gatto's door at one stage, but I can't say if I did or not. But the people who live in 3058 tend to be Italians. They tend to be involved in the underworld, or they tend to be Greeks and be involved in the underworld, or Lebanese and be involved in the underworld. And they're great people, but you don't want to mess with them, because they're likely to lose their temper. And they don't really care too much about little things like gun laws. Because, there's a thing about gun laws, they don't apply to criminals. Criminals can get guns whether, no matter what the police say. And the police don't really tend to harass criminals. They tend to harass regular people because regular people are just, they're not so awkward and difficult to deal with, to be perfectly honest. Just from what I've seen, this is just my observation of being married to a former gangster and living in 3058, and knowing the people who live there. And, I just think that it's literally one side of the street is 3056 and the other side of the street is 3058. They're locking down and annoying where all the rich people, rich white Aussies live, middle class, got 2 little dogs and all their kids in private schools and all the rest of it, and then, maybe an expensive car sitting in the lane out the back or whatever, or in the garage. Yeah, but they're the ones who are getting annoyed. And I mean, there's Lebanese people who live in these areas as well, like 3056. But I think that they would be well advised just to not answer the door, and to get a large dog. That's my advice. And just be prepared.
I've done that.
Hostile attitude when these people show up, and if enough people have a hostile attitude when these people show up. I'm not talking about being violent. I'm just talking about to have a stuff you attitude is what we would call it here in Australia. If enough people have a hostile attitude then these, contact tracers will soon decide that this is actually not a real comfortable job, and maybe they ought to find work doing something else. That's my advice. And I think that if enough people did that, then they would win. And they'd soon find that they wouldn't be able to contact tracers.
I smile when I think of you and David almost every day, and I'll tell you what it's about. So you've mentioned the dog breed Alsatian, and yes. Alsatian is the term that was used because after World War I, the Americans didn't want to buy German anything, and so nobody would have a dog named a German Shepherd, so they were called Alsatians. And I think back let's say 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they were renamed back to German Shepherds. So I have a couple of them. And I have to tell you that and I've had German Shepherds for most of my life, from being a teenager on, through right now. And I have to tell you that a German Shepherd dog is really intimidating to someone coming on the property. But 2 German Shepherd dogs is 5 to 10 times as intimidating, because what happens with me is, when these guys were younger, I would go to feed them, and one would be in front of me, the other one would walk behind me. And there was these guys are a well-oiled machine. 2 German Shepherds, and when I think of what David said, when I think of what David said about 2 German Shepherds, oh my gosh, I don't think, 1 is bad. If you're on the wrong side of a German Shepherd, 1 is really terrible, but 2, there's no getting away from 2. 1 cop against 2 German Shepherds, I think the Shepherds are going to win. David, any quick comments? We're going into a break.
They look beautiful when they link together and they work together. They look beautiful though, don't they?
So what I'm saying about these Alsatians or German Shepherds, when one is in front of you, it's intimidating. But if there are 2 of them, what happens is they seem to have a communication system without speaking to each other. One will be in front and one will be behind. And if you turn, there's still going to be 1 in front and 1 behind. And if you turn again, there's still going to be 1 in front and 1 behind. And they know how to do it. They know how to take you down.
Yeah.
Gwyneth, is that right?
If you don't hand over that food, they're going to, because you're their owner, they'll probably just politely jump on you.
Well, okay, last night,
yeah.
Class, you know that we live in the middle of nowhere, right? And last night, the Shepherds, they sleep in the house. Well, and they sleep outside too. I mean, it depends on what they want to do. Well, last night they happened to be inside. And we have dogs inside and outside, and they talk to each other. And, one will ring the alarm, and then they all go off, okay? Well, last night, and they sleep with their ears up. It's not like they have, it's not like, they're Hollywood stars and they've got earmuffs and eye covering on so they don't, know what's going on. They want to know what's going on. So they sleep with their ears perked. Last night they heard what they thought was a distress signal from the cows. And they woke us up immediately. And there were coyotes about ready to have dinner with some of our calves. And the next thing that was heard around here was gunshots. And then it all stopped. So there's an absolute purpose for all of our animals. The cats, we encourage them to go to the barn and, just kind of look for food. And they find mice and they eat the mice and they bring the heads back and leave them on the, right by the back door for us. So everybody has a job here. The cats are, protect the equipment from being eaten by, the wiring harnesses from being eaten by the mice. The mice finding their way into the air filter housings and eating the air filters and clogging, the engines and destroying the engines. And so Everybody has a job. And I think you might want to take a page out of Guineith's book, David's book, and our book, and consider getting some dogs that can actually be protection. And then, if you decide that you're going to have that business, that dog can be your security system. And then you can do what we do. And that's right off the cost of the security system. I'm talking about the maintenance, the care, the feeding, yep, and even having the technician, check up on the security system, make sure it's running at full performance. And that would be a veterinarian, the technician. I'm serious about that. We write off the cost of the veterinarian, the medicines, the food, the trip to the veterinarian, the trip to buy the dog food, all those things, we write that off because that's our security system. And I dare the IRS to challenge me on that. And if they do, I'll make them famous. I really will.
Can I ask you a question about your dogs?
David?
Sure. Do you train your dogs I've always trained my dogs not only with verbal commands, with facial as well as hand commands in case I'm speaking to somebody or in case they're far away. I had an issue where I had my 2 shepherds out and people, they could have went anywhere. Instead, they came right at me real fast. Well, they were about 50 yards away. Mm-hmm. By the time I gave them hand commands to stay and stay down, they didn't move, and they were like 4 feet from getting to those people. And it was amazing to see the look on their faces. I'm like, why would you do such a thing?
Yeah, I train. I do. I'm training these shepherds with hand commands, with facial movements, and vocal commands. And I've trained them so that when I call them, one's name is Mercedes. That's Mrs. Finelli's dog, and the other's Morgan. And I'll say, Mercedes, Morgan, come. And I can say it that loud, and they can be a couple 100 feet away. Their ears go up, and they come running. They race each other to get to me first, so you can get there first. And here's what I do. I give them treats, but I don't give them dog biscuits. We make bread here at the farm, and we cut it into slices, and then we cut the slices, we leave it out so it becomes hard and crispy. Then we cut it into sugar cube sizes, and I use those as treats. And they love them. And they pay attention. And so they come with hand signals, they come and they respond properly. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. David's with us. Guineith is in Australia. David is in Illinois. I have a couple interesting observations. So, I mentioned it just started storming here. In the last 30 minutes, we've had probably a little over 2 inches of rain in 30 minutes. Driveway's flooded. We're not going anywhere. We're kind of locked in because of the ground not being able to absorb all this moisture. That's one thing. That's kind of an unusual phenomenon, having 2 inches of rain in half an hour, right? The lightning took us off the air, but fortunately we were on a commercial break when that happened. So it knocked down the internet, the modem router cycled, and when we're good. Now it's all on UPS, but it wasn't the electricity because it's all on an uninterruptible power system. But it was the flash of lightning that caused the internet component of the CenturyLink internet to go down. And the next thing I'd like to share with you is I mentioned to Mrs. Finelli for days, I go in the kitchen, I feel dizzy. And I go in the kitchen, I feel dizzy. And it's in the kitchen. And what is it? She said, what about these LED can lights? They're all over the kitchen. I said, how about we take them out and replace them with incandescent lights? So we have 2 ceiling fixtures in it. One has 3 bulbs, one has 2 in the kitchen. So we took out the LED lights, put in 40-watt incandescents, of which we have a supply of. No dizziness. I'm suggesting that if you feel dizzy and you've got a lot of LED lights, that could be it. Because after we shut off the overhead lighting, the LED can retrofits, and there are a lot of them in the kitchen, that would make me dizzy. Shutting them off and replacing the lighting with just incandescent lights, no dizziness. I want you to think about that. Now, I don't have enough evidence to prove what I'm saying, but it sure looks like it. So you may want to try that in your home if you have a bunch of LED retrofit lights. And the reason is they have switch mode power supplies. They switch on and off at a high frequency. I think there really is something to this. So if you find out that you try that experiment and you find out that you're having the same experience, I'd love it if you'd call into USA Prepares and let us know. And that number is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. It doesn't have to be today. It can be any day. But I'm interested in finding out if you've experienced the same thing. And where do these lousy lights come from? All these LED lights with names like Philips and General Electric in Sylvania. Where do they come from, Gwyneth? Yeah.
China.
Yeah. Yep. And China is the country from which half of the above ground world supply of gold has been counterfeited. Half of the world supply of gold above ground. 83 tons of gold has been fraudulently counterfeited by the Chi-Coms. So if they're doing that,
I'd like to see the look on their faces when the people find out that all their investments are gone.
Yeah, and so class, why would you buy anything from China? And I didn't mean to switch gears, but I'd like to do it just for another 2 minutes. So I wanted to buy, I planted a whole bunch of tomato plants. Our family did. Mrs. Finelli, our children, and so we planted these tomato plants and pepper plants, and we expanded the garden. We made it 2x because we really believe that we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, all of us, from a food supply perspective as well as other perspectives. And one of the things I wanted to buy was a quality tomato mill. Tomato M-I-L-L. So what is that? Well, it's a device that you put tomatoes in, and you can remove the skins with this tomato mill. It's like a food processor, but it's not a blender. What it does is it pushes with an auger the tomato pulp through a cone-shaped screen with small holes in it, and the juice will come out, but the skins don't. So I wanted to buy one. I wanted to get an electric one, and the Italians make them. And we all know that Italians are really big on tomatoes. So, and the Italians make there's some fabulous engineering that goes on in Italy. I mean, if it weren't for Ford cheating with the F-40 car and bending the rules, Ferrari would have continued to dominate the Grand Prix. But the Ferrari is a great car in terms of racing. It's uncomfortable in terms of, driving it around. Well, I wanted to buy a tomato mill made in Italy, and I couldn't find one. And I mentioned it to Joey, and Joey found one. It's on the internet. It was on eBay. And so I looked at the link he sent me. It said, country, Italy, cast iron. That's it. That's exactly what I wanted to buy. So I bought it. And it came in. One of the boys picked it up from the UPS drop-off. Picked it up. It's in quarantine. I went to look at it. And then I thought, this box looks like it's a Chinese box. You can tell a Chinese box, right? It looks like recycled cardboard. It's got the plastic straps on it. The printing. I mean, you can tell China, right? I was really heartbroken. I thought, gosh darn it, this lousy thing is made in China. So I opened up the box. And I thought, it doesn't look like cast iron to me. So I took out the magnet. We have one of these Craftsman magnets on a telescoping rod So when we drop something under the car or in the engine compartment, we can just take this rod and fish it out. Well, I used that strong magnet on the casting. It's not magnetic, it's not ferrous, it's not cast iron, it's aluminum. And it's not made in Italy, it's made in China. And nowhere on it does it say China. I was livid. And I took this guy to task. And you know what they said on this website? They said, yeah, it's the listing department. They got it wrong. Yes, you're right. It's not made in Italy. It's not cast iron. Yep, you're right. It was the listing department. And they said, we'll give you $30 back. Now, it was $240. And they said, we'll give you $30 back. So I responded. I said, I based my entire tomato crop on this. I wanted to see exactly what they would do. I don't want this thing. And they sent me a return shipping label because I escalated it through eBay. And it's a company called WYZ, I think. So and you'll see it on Amazon. Go to Amazon, you look up tomato mill or tomato machine, electric tomato machine, you'll see it. It's got a black motor. They say cast iron. They say Italy. It's not. It's a lie. So I'm looking forward to, giving them the credit they all deserve. But what I'm saying is they counterfeit gold. They counterfeit silver dollars. They make substandard products. They steal from American technology. You can't trust these guys. They've infected the whole world with the virus that's taking down every world's economy. They've set the world on fire. The Chinese. Don't buy Chinese stuff. Don't feed the Chinese. They've got us by the throat, though, because they make the bearings. They make the wheels. They make the axles. They make all kinds of stuff. And they go so far to cheat us that the auger, now, we made some of these in the United States. There are several companies that made these, and there were Italian companies that made these tomato mills as well. And they used a metal auger made out of cast iron. And then, to cheapen them, they made the cast iron parts out of aluminum and the auger out of aluminum. And what do the Chinese do? They make a plastic auger, and instead of making it look like it's plastic, they make it gray in color. So it looks like, in a picture, if you look at this thing on the internet, you go, oh, where? There's a cast metal auger. That's the kind we want. But it's gray plastic. Now, how do you make gray plastic? Well, sometimes you take aluminum dust and you mix it with plastic. So it has an aluminum color to it. Chinese. Try not to buy Chinese products.
As it wears, you'll get aluminium fragments in your food, which is poison.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that causes dementia. That's the stuff that causes Alzheimer's disease. Aluminum or aluminium, as it's said in Australia.
Australian stuff. It's the same stuff.
Yeah. David, any comments about how the Chi-Coms lie, cheat, and swindle us?
When I first got into doing computer work, I would order supplies, and a lot of your supplies would come from China. And I got some defective products. And when I called and spoke to the director of the sales department, he's like, hey, you got to get with the program. We're just in to sell as much as we can to outdo the other companies. We don't care if they work. And this was the director of the department. And I'm like, you're kidding, right?
What companies did you deal with when you bought parts?
I preferably like to do Seagate or Western Digital for hard drives. Processors, I went with Intel because AMD was one of the other companies that did not care. Mm-hmm. Their chips came from Malaysia. They just wanted to sell.
Well, so did Intel's. Intel's didn't come from this country either. They came from Malaysia as well.
Right, but they honored theirs because you could buy a box. You can get it a 3-year warranty with it, and they guaranteed the thing to work. Or AMD,
and they put their own
OEM.
And they put their own heatsink on it. So when you bought an Intel processor, you got the Intel heatsink with it, which was big enough to do the job. Whereas with other processors like Cyrix and AMD, that was not necessarily the case.
No.
And
they
I'll
made
tell you what. Tell you what I saw in the industry. I was in it as a manufacturer of computer products. You might have called us an assembler of computer products. What I found out was that in the early days, the best motherboards, also known as the main boards, came from the United States. Absolutely the best. Could not beat them. Then there was another country of origin of motherboards that was second best. That was Japan. So the best came from the United States, the second best came from Japan. Then the United States was shoved aside and the best came from Japan and the second best came from Taiwan. And then the Japanese were shoved aside and the best came from Taiwan and the second best came from China. Now there's only China. Is that right?
Right. In China, what they did was hack the chipset, and they stole the chipset.
Right.
For the motherboards.
Right. Right. And Gresham's Law in full force. Substandard wins the day every time, whether it be tools, money, doesn't matter. Substandard wins. We'll be Class, I want to thank Ron Gibson, my dear friend in the Carolinas. He's the gentleman who takes the feed from USA Prepares, strips out the commercials, and posts it on YouTube every day. He's been doing it for years and years. I want to thank him. And yesterday I asked him if he would, in addition to doing that, if he would strip out the 11-minute monologue that I had at the beginning of the broadcast that I titled, What Went Wrong with America? Those are my thoughts. I did an 11-minute monologue at the beginning of the broadcast yesterday with Rich Sheben. Rich Sheben had no idea what I was going to do in terms of the content of the monologue. And it's available on YouTube on the Ron Gibson channel, What Went Wrong with America. Guineith, did you happen to hear that?
I think I did, yeah. I did listen to the broadcast this morning. I downloaded it before I went into town. And, yeah, I did hear that. And, you know, it's, in my humble opinion, okay, things started to go wrong with America pretty well as soon as television was introduced. You know, I think that is, even though the early shows weren't so bad, that was when the rock started to set in. You know, because people found that they could sit in their own home and just stare at a box when they could be doing something a lot more productive, and it just destroyed the work ethic, okay? And then you had all these other problems like Roe versus Wade, which led to the slaughter of like millions of little babies, and God can't wink at that sort of thing. Then you start losing the blessing of God, and then you're in trouble because, you know, a lot of people, I know that the Catholic Church teaches that the protection of God's angels is absolutely paramount and that you should pray for God's angels to protect you every day. And I certainly pray for God's angels to protect me every day. I would advise that everybody out there ought to get on the right side with Jesus Christ. And they ought to ask God to send his angels. Father God, in Jesus' name, I pray you send your angels to protect me as I go about my business today. You know? And if you pray that in the morning, you will find that your whole day goes so much better because you've got angels helping you. And people are ignoring this sort of spiritual teaching. This is the good side of Christianity. This is the good side of the church. And, you know, the church didn't help things because there was a whole lot of pedophilia and there was a whole lot of political scandals, political religious scandals, you know, finding out that the local priest was doing satanic ceremonies in his spare time in a lot of places, you know, and all of this sort of stuff. God can't wink at that sort of stuff. But if the local people just stand up and say, we're not putting up with this, and we're going to turn our lives over to Jesus Christ, and we're going to start living the sorts of lives that God would be happy with, And you don't need anybody to tell you what sort of life that is. Your own conscience will tell you what sort of life that is. You know, everybody knows you shouldn't steal. Everybody knows you shouldn't go chasing your neighbour's wife. Everybody knows you shouldn't go killing little babies in the womb. Nobody has to tell anybody this. Everybody knows you shouldn't be jealous of your neighbour's stuff. That's called coveting. Okay? And, you know, this is the law that's written on the human heart. Everybody knows that you ought to be good to each other, and especially to your own family. And if you're in a position where you can be good to your community, you know,
everybody except Hollywood, where they say greed is good, and a marriage can't last more than a few minutes, and multiple Hollywood actri have had many marriages. I mean, 3, 4, 5. It's ridiculous. But Hollywood teaches you now that greed is good. You know, people like the Kardashian filth bend over every way they can possibly think of. And if they can't think of a new one, they'll invent a new way to bend over in front of the camera. It's disgusting. David, did you have a chance to, or did you hear yesterday's monologue? And if you did, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I heard it. I seen it was on there separately because I tried to get it, but like I said, my internet has been down. Matter of fact, you got me getting rain again. Thank you. You know, I see a lot of that stuff, and it you know, I've been around a lot of older people, and they showed me what life was like back then, and we're at a day now where we're negotiating with church about what's acceptable. When do you negotiate with a church about what's acceptable if it's in the Bible? We're negotiating
very
with
good
religion.
points. And the reason I did this was to show you the way it was, because it was a lot better then. And what has turned out has been the destruction of America. And we didn't stop it. It's going to get worse. David, thank you. Guineith, thank you for being with us and staying up late in Australia.